Andrew, how are you?
Hello, Nicolette. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for saying yes to be interviewed. For our listeners and for you, I'd like to introduce myself formally. My name is Nicolette, and I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again. The juxtaposition of your very soul. First off, I'd like to say thank you very much for saying yes to be interviewed today, all the way in New York, and I'm right now in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So, greetings from a
I appreciate those greetings and greetings from New York as well.
Thank you, thank you. So before we start, I'd like to read a bit of your introduction for our listeners, and then we can get right into our conversation. So, hey everyone, we have Andrew O'Brien here with us. Andrew is the founder of the Mindblowing Coach, a business with a sole mission of boldly and authentically partnering with individuals and organizations in sustainably transcending whatever chronic stress or burnout is plaguing them so that they can live life with more meaning, purpose, energy, health, and joy. Now, with 25 years of relevant experience, Andrew also holds an MBA in HR management, a BA in communication, and is credentialed as a professional certified coach through the ICF, International Coaching Federation, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, and Society for Human Resource Management Senior Certified Professional. Wow, welcome, Andrew. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Say that 10 times fast.
So, Andrew, okay, before we get right into business, right, can you share with us what was it like growing up as an Andrew O'Brien?
What was it growing up? So that is a really good, deep, and long question.
Yeah, my podcast, we tend to go deep right off the bat.
Right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like for me? If you look at a 50,000-foot view, my life, like super privileged. I was born into a family that there was a lot of love to go around, and um, from that perspective, like it was a very supportive, very loving family. And so when you look at that 50,000-foot view, you would think that like nothing would be off,
Nothing, yeah,
you know?
everything's perfect.
Yeah, everything is perfect in that situation, and like great town, education system, very strong, and I keep thinking about how fortunate I was to actually have that bringing up and uh, background that I did. That's the 50,000-foot view. But when you get deeper, when you get closer to that sea level, I guess, is when, as I was growing up, I started to notice that I was different,
Mm.
different from even my immediate family, different from the people I was around, and how different, like what does different mean in this context? Different means in this context. I started to realize that I was not interested in forming like those romantic relationships with females, and that was a big thing to come to terms with in the environment in which I was growing up, because in the environment in which I was growing up, very much white, very much straight. And yeah, I'm white, but I was coming to terms and realizing that like I wasn't fitting in that straight mold. And one of the things that not one of the things, like as I was growing up, there were times on the media, like on the TV, on the news and such, I would see these like horrific stories of gay people, not necessarily in my town, but in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, gay people being attacked violently and sometimes fatally, just for the fact of them being gay. And so as I was like learning more and more about that part of me and trying to figure it all out with having no mentors in the picture, and not being like comfortable enough to open up to my family at that point and tell them, kind of like felt like I was in this alone. And that was really kind of frightening for me, especially what I was seeing on the media. Like, am I going to get killed too? Am I going to get attacked too if I start to tell people like these feelings that I was having, which in my mind were abnormal, because what I was seeing around me was not that. And so that when you bring it all down to the sea level, that I think that's one of the biggest things that I was encountering, experiencing, and the ways in which my brain, now like all of this knowledge that I've accumulated over my life, I'm very much into the brain. And what my brain was doing back then was trying to protect me. And the fear that I had about the possibility of being attacked for being who I was. My brain basically, as a way to protect me, told me to do certain things to try to fit into
Mm.
my community that in the long term were not so healthy for me. And I'll get into
Yeah.
that. But one of those things was, all right, so how can I fit in? Because if I fit in, I'll be safe. That's what
Yeah.
my brain told me. And one of the ways in which I decided to try to fit in, like basically there were two main paths you could go, two popular paths that you could go down in my schooling, in my high school. And that was like to be like an athlete or to be very, very smart. I wasn't super like athletic at the time. So I was like, all right, let me choose the nerd path. So and so that's what I chose. And so I became that person who like was very like I went to class all the time. I studied hard all the time, worked to get those A's. And that's the thing. Like I put so much pressure on myself to get those straight A's. I wasn't really getting that from my parents. I was getting that like more from me. And yeah, like they cared about my grades for sure, don't get me wrong. But the pressure that I was experiencing, I really do believe I was mostly putting that on myself. And if I didn't get those A's, and this went
What
beyond,
am I? What is my worth to the
yeah,
world? Ah, I
yeah,
love that. Yeah.
like, and this went into college years. This went into my work years. Like, if I didn't fit in with that like perfect intellect, and even if I got that A minus, even if I got that B plus, like how I would beat myself up inside, it was just like insane. And now I know how unhealthy that all is. But in the time, I thought like I was fitting in and I was like society's accepting me and all of this kind of stuff. And that was all reinforced because like when you get those straight A's, you get on those honor rolls, you get those awards, you get those certificates, you get those, you get into the good schools and all of that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it was like built-in reinforcement to kind of like keep me going that way. But I like now I know how unhealthy that all was to put all that pressure on myself. So long story short, I could for hours
I
if you can't already. But long story
we're gonna have you for season 2, so don't worry. There's a continuation for this.
awesome. So that I think gives you a little inside look to my growing up as an Andrew O'Brien.
Andrew, I'd like to thank you for being so candid and vulnerable with me. This is for our listeners. This is our first time. We never had a meeting prior to this interview, and right off the bat, he chose to share his story with me. For that, I am very, very honored and truly thankful for trusting me with that. And as you also can see, my podcast talks a lot about self-worth,
Mm.
and it is something that I also came to terms with. My story is slightly different but also similar, where I felt worthless because of the I wasn't fitting in the mold of being the high achiever, getting grades because I wanted to prove to the society or to my parents or society even that I'm worth something only when I obtain certain things in my life. So, and that is actually the impetus of my podcast and me coming with the show, is to kind of like a plea for like, it was help before, but right now it's just more to connect with people who suffered that. When suffered is a very negative word, but who used to live that experience and right now are on the other side of it. So, yes, and I'd like to thank you for sharing your story. So, now the question, we're going to pivot to chronic stress and burnout. This is where your expertise lie. So tell us, what is chronic stress or burnout, Andrew?
What is chronic stress and burnout? So chronic stress and burnout are two phases of this stress system. I'll call it like so. We are all born with a stress response system. That is a very healthy thing for us to have. That is a very normal thing for us to have. And what the goal, like what should be happening with us as humans is like the natural flowing in and out of the different sides of that stress response system. So on the one hand, you have what's known as the sympathetic nervous system. On the other hand, you have the parasympathetic nervous system. And both of those sides of the overall system are there to do different things for us. The parasympathetic nervous system is really our rest and rejuvenate kind of system. that's built into us, programmed into us. And then on the other hand, the sympathetic nervous system is when, like, in those moments where we feel threatened. Throw in a recent example, actually. Yes, I live in New York City, and I live pretty close to Central Park. And the other day, maybe not the other day, maybe a couple of months ago at this point, I was walking through the park in the morning, and in the morning, like, all of the dogs are allowed to run around without leashes, which is like really the cutest thing in the world. Like, they're just like running around,
Roaming.
yeah, and all their owners are like talking to each other and having fun. It's really actually a beautiful thing to see, especially if you're an animal person like I am. But this one particular morning, I was walking, and I actually noticed that there was this dog that was charging me. Yeah, which never happened before. And I'm in the park,
No.
and it was barking, and it was barking, and like running from way across, like, and I thought it was like literally charging at me. And it didn't look super friendly. It didn't look like it wanted to play. But that's what triggered my sympathetic nervous system. That moment triggered my sympathetic nervous system, and that's what we want. Because what did I do in real time without even thinking about it? Our brains are like that amygdala inside our brain. That's like the center of our fear response center. And my amygdala in that moment told me, I can't like see my full body, but I was upright and like shifted to the side, away from the dog instinctively. And that's natural, and that's a normal and a healthy reaction, because like really our chest, this is the most vulnerable part of us. And so
Yeah.
what I noticed was like me like protecting that in a way.
Right.
So if this dog bites me, it's going to take a chunk out of the rear end,
Yeah.
as opposed to like this vulnerable part of me,
The organs. Yeah.
you know. And that all happened without me, like, I wasn't logical about it. It was an instinctual thing, and that's what's driven by the amygdala. That's what's driven by the sympathetic nervous system. And what's happening in that moment, your adrenaline is like through the roof. Your pupils change in size, your heart rate increases, like all of these different things in the body controlled by the sympathetic nervous system, they happen automatically. We don't think about it. It just happens. Now, as I mentioned, the goal is to kind of like, we're always going to experience those moments in life, right? And so we want that amygdala to protect us in those situations. So have compassion for that part of our brain. It is a survivalist part of our brain. No judgment of that part of the brain. It is who we are. It's what we're here to do. That said, it is 100% possible to thrive, and we can get there in just a moment. But to answer the question, what is chronic stress and burnout? If we're not managing this stress system, and it is absolutely critical that we in this day and age are, just given the inundation of information, how much we are doing in a given day, it's a lot different from humans like eons ago.
Yes.
And so it's very easy for us to fall into this chronic stress and burnout stage, because left unmanaged, that sympathetic nervous system will stay activated. When that stays activated, that's when the negative outcomes can happen to us. I'm not saying that like if a dog bit me, that's also a negative outcome, but this also, that dog didn't bite me, just for the record.
Did the dog bite you? No.
No.
Oh,
For the record,
okay. Thank God.
that will lead to negative health outcomes, whether that's physical stress symptoms, whether that's emotional stress symptoms. And we can get into specifics about that if that's applicable. But if left unmanaged, that's when that ongoing persistent experience of stress, that's what chronic stress is. And then beyond the chronic stress phase, there is a phase called burnout, which is just when you feel as though you literally have like nothing left to give in the tank. And the chronic stress and burnout can be felt differently by different people, because we're all unique nervous systems. We all have the same nervous system, but we all have different life experiences, and our nervous systems have been conditioned and shaped in different ways. So we're going to have different symptoms of chronic stress and burnout, but generally speaking, it's irritability. It's a sense of feeling off, disconnected. It's a sense of no energy, lack of energy to even like get by in any sort of day. The loss of motivation. Those are some general kind of things that we can feel and experience if we are in those states. Does that make sense?
What? Maybe you can share with us, like from the context of your own experience, like what did you experience in terms of chronic stress or burnout, or if you ever did experience, and then what did you do that made you realize that, okay, this is burnout, enough is enough, and I'm gonna have to change, or else I'm gonna drop dead or something. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And for the majority of my life, this was a struggle for me.
mm,
And it really all did stem from trying to be someone who I wasn't. And so over the years, I experienced all sorts of physical stress symptoms, emotional stress symptoms. And just to kind of share a few of them, like as a kid, biting my nails, constant biting my nails. We did so many things to try to stop me biting my nails, but including like putting like spicy stuff on the nail that tasted really gross, like all sorts of things. I was a bedwetter for a like. Have you ever experienced like an eyelid twitch?
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, in Asia, we call it like if it's the right side that's twitching, it's good luck. And then if it's the left side, it's bad luck. That's all. But then, of course, when you go into the medical symptoms of it, it'll be like, oh, there must be something wrong with your nervous system around the eye. But sometimes you
Yeah.
just want to trick yourself into believing that right side, okay,
Yeah.
some good news is coming. But of course, if left unchecked, it could be, more detrimental than what it seems.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, yeah. No disrespect to um
The culture, the
culture.
Asian culture.
Exactly. But yeah, like I experienced during my latest round of burnout, which was like a few years ago at this point, I had experienced that eyelid twitch. It was on the right hand side for literally a year straight.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And not painful, but very, 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 very annoying because it's
Mm.
literally like waking hours. It's just constant, constant, constant twitching. I had a case of hemorrhoids. That might be TMI, but yeah, a case of hemorrhoids that can be brought on by stress. And even from the emotional side, I felt down. I did work with a therapist. I was never clinically diagnosed with depression, but I felt down for quite a while. And so I don't like to use the word depressed because that is a real thing for many,
Mm-hmm.
many people. And if folks are
Yes.
clinically, I strongly encourage them to work with a therapist to support them through that. I was not happy. I was not feeling myself. I was really, I call it down. I was feeling really down for quite some time. And so those were just, oh, and I also had, don't know the medical term. I can look it up, but it's when the optic nerve with the eye kind of like bends. It like
Mm-hmm.
fills here with liquid and it kind of impacts your vision. I've also experienced that in my life.
Wow.
And that is quite scary because like you actually see your vision deteriorating and you're like, what is happening? And so I got that checked out. I wish I remembered the diagnosis. The last word is retinopathy. Maybe it's central serous retinopathy. I could be wrong there, but basically at the end of the day, it's one of what's one of the biggest contributors to that diagnosis, stress.
Mm-hmm.
So I experienced a lot of physical stress symptoms, emotional stress symptoms, and really it was the last bout of it that I experienced, which was 3 to 4 years ago. I remember just reflecting that this can't be life. There has to be more to life than just experience like this misery and yeah, I agree. Suffering is a really harsh, strong word, but I'm struggling to kind of think of other words to describe like all of this pain that and annoyance that I was experiencing for many years out of my life. And it was in those moments where I said, life has to be more than this. I want to experience more happiness in life. And how do I do that? Like, so once I got to the awareness of like, no, there has to be more. There has to be more than this. I was coupling that with a spiritual journey that I was on as well. And through all of that I was coming across, information wise, science wise, I kind of figured out like the magic pill for managing my stress. And one of my other like frustrations in life is that I wish we were taught this stuff in school. I wasn't. Maybe that's changed now, but my understanding is that for the most part, this stuff is not taught in schools, and that's really unfortunate. But basically, throughout my life and just dealing with my different symptoms and going through my spiritual journeys and learning about the science, I was picking up these different pieces of science of what we can do biologically to manage our stress so that we don't have to experience what I experienced. I wish it was on a one pager back in the day, like a flyer. Here's what you can do. But I was just getting it piecemeal over the years.
Yeah.
And so what I've done really over the past few years is to kind of summarize and compile all of the science into one of my clients actually called them the O'Brien 10. I can't take credit for it because
Sure, you should trademark it.
uh, but like I'm not a researcher or a scientist, so I can't take credit for the science, but
Mm-hmm.
what I can
Mm-hmm.
take for is like putting it all together into a one pager. Um, that one of my clients did call the O'Brien 10, which I thought was hilarious. So I've been using O'Brien 10. So that's how I got to where I got to, and what I started to do. I could get into those O'Brien 10 if you think that would be good, but that's what I did to manage my stress. And like from a biological perspective, we can live without experiencing chronic stress. We can live without experiencing burnout. And that's my one mission on this planet because I know what it's like to be there and it's not fun.
Yeah,
And I know this life can be fun. And I'm not saying that we're not going to have our ups and downs,
that's right.
but we can certainly manage ourselves so that we're like riding the highs of life and loving the highs of life. And then when the downs happen, we get through it quick. We efficiently
Yeah.
through it.
And we
And that,
regulate,
and you
especially
regulate.
when it's, yeah, especially
You-
when we're dipping.
Exactly.
I
We don't have to stay here. We don't have to stay in the bottom.
correct. And
Yeah.
being aware that, okay, we're here. What do we need to do to get back up again? But at the same time, being kind to yourself, being compassionate, that understanding that it's okay. You're not going to be here all the time. There will be times where you're going to, here. But then that's life, right? And I love that. And it's just now, I think I mentioned the earlier part of the interview said that my burnout before was caused by throughout my career achievement because I tied my self-worth to my career achievement. But then with your story, I love it. It's because you were trying to fit into the mold of the society. And I think it's also important right now that people can experience stress or burnout through in every different facets of their life. It doesn't have to be just career because usually when you hear about burnout, it's about career all the way up because he or she is in the medical field or he or she is in investment, what would you call that, in Wall Street, etc., yada yada. And I love that. So it's another perspective for me as well. Today, I'm learning that okay, people, whatever is it they're experiencing, that it can also be. It doesn't have to be career related whenever
Yeah.
they're experiencing burnout. Yeah, could be in relationship too. Think of it. If you're in an abusive, not it's an unhealthy, can be a burnout. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You said that. I love that you picked up on it because there's a lot of people out there who like truly believe it's just a workplace setting situation, but no,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So, and that for that, Andrew, I'd like you to share with us, if it's possible, what is that O'Brien 10 step? What
Yeah.
what what is that? How do you pronounce that?
Yeah.
O'Brien 10.
So my last name is O'Brien.
Yeah,
So the O'Brien 10.
10
'Cause,
as in like the digit 10.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
because
Well, okay.
there's 10. Yeah.
Okay. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
can expand on it. And some of the O'Brien 10 are just like, yeah, like just reminders of like
Okay.
this is this is super obvious and like I lost sight of that. Some of them are a little bit like, oh, I never really thought about that. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the thing. Um and before I get into them, I just want to kind of like I always give the disclaimer, there's no order of importance
Yeah.
to the O'Brien 10. The other disclaimer that I give is this applies to all of us as
Mm-hmm.
humans. However, how we apply each of these categories into our life, because we are very different, can be different from person to person to person, and that's okay. Uh, and that's where it becomes individualized. But all of these categories, as humans, they
It's
do,
applicable. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So the first category is oxygen, and there you go. I saw you take that breath.
That's cute to breathe.
Yeah, yeah. I hope all the listeners are taking that pause to breathe right now. I am not because I'm talking and I'm on the podcast as a guest. But yeah, so the breath, the conscious deep breathing, we want to look to optimize that throughout our day. Our brains actually use approximately 20% of our total oxygen supply. body's oxygen supply. And so even mild deprivation over time can lead to feeling fatigue, feeling like hazy, foggy, and over time that could lead us down a path towards where we don't want to go. And so that brain craves the oxygen, and I guarantee you, myself included, we get lost in our day, and we're shallow breathing quite often.
Yeah,
And
and we tend to stay at that thing that then you notice when and it's like you're having that headache and oh, I forgot to breathe.
yeah,
And then suddenly, okay, your brain seems a bit, I don't want I wonder what's the better word for it. Like it's freer in a
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Hey, it's
and
not so
free.
tight anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and there's so many different like breathing methods out there. I encourage you all to do a Google search, see what resonates with you. There's a lot of science out there around a few different breathing methods. One of them is called the box breathing method. I don't know if you've heard of that, but the box breathing method is where you're creating a box with your breath, basically. And so you're inhaling for a count of 4, you're holding
Right.
4, you're exhaling for a count of 4, and
Yes, yes, yes.
that seems to work. And there's research behind it. There's like teams going back to the workplace, teams that experience high stress day in and day out. They've used this method and they do see benefits from it. The Navy SEALs being one of those groups of people have used this method in the past. And so, but that's just one of many. That's just one of many breathing methods out there. So as I mentioned, find what works for you. Find the method that works for you. But the whole point is to kind of like deep breathe, like bring those inhales down to your bottoms of your bellies, or you can imagine inhaling and fueling that brain. Sometimes I do that imagine work as well. And just like with these inhales, I just imagine that all of that beautiful oxygen is going into our brains and giving it what it craves. So that's the first category. Second category is all about water, hydration. Our brains, this is crazy. Our brains are 80% water.
Really.
Yeah. And
Body is 70% water, but the brain is 80% water. So, whoa, okay.
80% water. And so again, same as the oxygen, even mild deprivation can lead us down a path that towards that chronic stress and burnout. I invite you to think about how much simple water, right? I invite you to think about how much you are drinking in a day. We're not talking about carbonated water. We're not talking about water mixed with anything else, just straight up water. How much are we drinking in a day? I know you and I are in different countries right now. Whenever I teach this stuff here, I do speak to the CDC guidance and recommendations, and I will share a couple of CDC recommendations for a couple of different categories in a bit. In this water category, however, the CDC they haven't put out any sort of formal guidance on how much water we should be drinking as humans each day, because we are in different parts of the world with different temperatures and maybe different physical activity levels and such. And so I don't think they will ever be able to come out with guidance on that end, because it really all depends of how much activity we're getting and how much we're sweating, and all of that factors into how much we should be drinking as well. But I have partnered with a couple of different nutritionists who did not know each other, and so do support what both of these nutritionists told me. And what their guidance is that we should be monitoring our urine color and just making sure that it's pale yellow, seeing if we can manage like a pale yellow urine color throughout the day. And both of them said, if we can do that, we should be hydrated enough. And so that's the hydration category. The third category is all about nutrition. And nutrition is a really, really, really big category. It's also a very complex and complicated category. There's a lot of people who disagree with each other out there. What diet is best for us humans, and there is no one size fits all. So I'm not going to get into like a diet plan to give out right now, but I will give some general guidance. And but before I get there, the science, one of the pieces of science in connection with nutrition, floors me every time I say it out loud. Serotonin is one of our feel-good hormones. Did you know that around 95% of that serotonin production happens in our gut?
And that is why whenever we eat cake or chocolate, we feel good.
Yeah. That's hilarious. And that gut is very intimately connected with our brains, and it's connected by the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
Vagus nerve is there. It's like a communication highway. And so if the gut is not getting the nutrition that it craves. That serotonin production doesn't have an opportunity to produce and manufacture the way it can.
And therefore, you're gonna feel crap.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just getting way ahead of myself right now.
The cakes and stuff, that those sugars, that actually triggers our dopamine release, which is also a feel good hormone.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dopamine, however, like those cakes can actually become like a drug, because like the more the dopamine releases, the more we want it. And then the more we kind of like, it's going to take a lot more cake basically to get that same dopamine hit in our bodies. But I'm going to get into that in just a second. But yeah, so from a CDC recommendation, right? This is what all nutritionists can agree on. We should be optimizing those vegetables. We should be optimizing those fruits. We should be optimizing the lean proteins, the grains, the seeds, nuts, like the whole grains. That's where a lot of the fibers come from, including the vegetables and fruits and stuff. The healthy fats, the omega-3s is what we should be optimizing. All of this stuff are the good gut bacteria that we have, like, loves this stuff, and that's what it needs to kind of keep us going. What we should be staying away from are those added sugars. So limiting and avoiding those added sugars. And that's tough for me because I am a sweet tooth. I do love those cakes as well, but treats are okay, right? This is not to say to completely avoid if you don't want to. Treats are okay, just as long as we're not having a treat all the time. Personally, I've created a plan where I allow myself a piece of cake like once a week. That's my strategy to kind of keep in check.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so limiting or avoiding the added sugars, limiting or avoiding more of that process. I mean, especially in this country, the US, like our food supply system is horrendous and it's disgusting, and there's so much processed foods.
Yeah.
And it's so sad. It's so unfortunate. And I really hope changes are made in that front, because we're putting poison into our bodies like each day, and it's just not okay. Avoiding and limiting alcohol too. That's what CDC also recommends and advises. So that's category number 3. Category number 4 is all about that physical activity level. And when we move, we are born to move. We are human. And when we move, we're actually increasing the blood flow. We're increasing the oxygen to our brains. Another benefit that's happening when we exercise is we are optimizing our learning and memory, which that's pretty cool too. From the CDC perspective, and again, this is one of those categories, like this is going to be very individual for people, because, one person might like to play baseball. One person might like to do yoga.
Yeah.
One person might hate running. That's all okay, right? The whole point is to figure out what it is that your body loves to do and just do it. Gardening can be considered activity, right? Sometimes we don't even think about like these things that we're doing, that we are actually like doing movement. But there's so many different things out there that we can do to move. From the CDC perspective, guidance, we as humans, healthy adults, and adult meaning between 18 and 65, we should be getting at least 150 minutes of moderate activity each week.
150 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, which can be split up however you'd like. In addition to at least 2 days of kind of more that resistance muscle training, weight training, or if it's vigorous activity, at least 75 minutes across the week. That's guidance come from the CDC. There are other populations out there, pregnant population, folks who are above 65, people if they're experiencing chronic health conditions. The CDC has different recommendations for those groups. So I encourage folks, whatever country you're in, there might be something equivalent to the CDC, and I would recommend that you check those sites out. And if not, check the CDC out too, because it could kind of give a nice like guide for what you might do moving forward from that perspective. So that's number 4. Category number 5 is all about sleep. Sleep is super, super, super critical for us.
I love that. I love that category. Sleep.
Yeah. To manage our stress system. And one of the main things that's actually happening scientifically during our sleep cycle is during the deep part of our sleep cycle, which happens a few times across the overall cycle, is I don't know if you've heard of the glymphatic system, but the glymphatic system triggers during the deep parts of our sleep cycle. And what that does is flushes out all of the dead neurotransmitters that have accumulated throughout the day in your brain, flushes all of that out into your body and out of your body. If we're not getting that deep sleep. That system doesn't have a chance to do what it does. And so I always, when I teach this stuff, when I work with my clients, I always say it's no wonder why you're waking up feeling groggy. It's no wonder why you're waking up feeling like you want to hit the snooze button over and over again. Like you just don't have the energy to, even though you have to get up and go to work, like you just like, maybe you call out sick, like who knows? But it's biological, because like those dead neurotransmitters, they will accumulate over time, and of course will lead to us feeling groggy, fatigued, tired, low energy, and over time, unchecked, chronic stress burnout. From the CDC guidelines, again, as humans, adult humans, at least 7 hours of regular, consistent sleep daily. And some people might need more than that, but at least 7 hours of that regular sleep is from the science perspective what we as humans should be getting every day. And if this is a struggle for some of the listeners here today, some of the things that you might think about, maybe you already have thought about this, but some of the things that I want to highlight here is some things that you could do is check your sleeping environment. Is it dark? Is it quiet? Is it at a temperature that you feel comfortable in? The CDC recommends cool temperature. I actually prefer a little bit warmer than that because I run cold. The point is that we don't want to like wake up in the middle of the night in like a deep sweat, because if we wake up in a deep sweat, we're waking up basically, and we don't want to disrupt that cycle. So just making sure it's a temperature that you feel comfortable in, and that you're not waking up in a deep sweat. These things.
Okay.
Right? The iPhones, the iPads, I'm putting myself in this category too, people. I work every day to try to minimize this. And what's happening there, the blue light technology is keeping our brains awake. And there is technology to minimize that. I encourage you to explore those options and tools on your phones, on your iPads. But at the end of the day, you're still getting that stimulation from these devices, and your brain is being told to stay awake. And so that could also be impacting you falling asleep in a timely time. Not eating heavy meals close to when you want to go to sleep, because that your body still needs to digest that food. And if your body's in the process of digesting, that's going to impact how much quality sleep you're getting. Not doing vigorous physical activity close to when you go to sleep. Yes, exercise is really critical. And if the window right before you go to sleep is the only time that you get to do your exercise, maybe not so very vigorous. Maybe we can kind of like do some more of like the moderate activity in that window of time. Yeah, so those are all some sort of like recommendations from the CDC as to optimize the sleep hygiene. And that is category number 5. Category number 6 is different. Many people think it's the same, but it is different. And that's called rest, not sleep. What we're talking about here, rest, this is breaks, downtime. On average, our brains start to fatigue after about 90 minutes of focused activity.
Yeah, I thought something was wrong with me. And then I just naturally get drawn to, start laying down on my couch and just closing my eyes and taking a nap. I used to go like at least 2-3 hours nonstop when I was younger.
Right.
But
Yeah,
right now, no. Like, yeah, the maximum it's 90 minutes, and then I'm like exhausted. I can't even keep my eyes like really that 90% focus, 100% focus for 2 straight hours.
yeah.
Mm.
And so what the recommendation is to and that's average, right? We could start to fatigue sooner than that, depending on the
Yeah,
intensity.
intensity of the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So the whole idea is to see how you might be able to incorporate, like sprinkle in breaks throughout the day, and I'm not talking about like hours of a break. I mean, unless you have the bandwidth to do that, by all means, Godspeed. But it really only takes a few minutes. It really only takes a few minutes of like taking that beat, stop what you're doing, if you can, right? I do a lot of work with folks in a hospital setting too, and I know people like surgeons who are in surgery. Sometimes surgeries go beyond the 90 minutes, and so in those cases, obviously, you're not going to stop what you're doing in those moments. But maybe after that surgery, maybe before that surgery, you do something to take a break and give your brain that break. But as realistic as possible for you and what you are doing in your day-to-day, think about this break time, think about this rest time. And ideally, what you want to be doing in those few minutes of a rest period is to stop doing what you're doing and think about something that is uplifting for you. Think about your overall meaning in life. Think about, I know some people take out their phones because they have like access to their pictures in there, and seeing like a loved one or a pet or a vacation that they just went on. Something to kind of like bring your brain to somewhere else that ideally brings you some joy and happiness is what I would recommend in those rest periods. The science also shows that the more that we do this, the more efficient we are going to be when we are actually focused on whatever it is that we are doing and getting it done quicker. That's what I have to say about rest. Category number 7, all about gratitude, appreciation, thankfulness. And this actually has a direct impact in our brains as well. And what's happening when we are more grateful? We are, I didn't mention this at the top of our podcast today, but that amygdala that I did mention, when we are in a state of chronic stress and burnout, the amygdala actually expands in size, which is fascinating. MRIs show that the amygdala expands in size. There's 2 other brain parts that shrink in size. Prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus shrink in size. And these 2 other brain parts, we don't want them to shrink in size because that's our logic, that's our rationale, that's our positive emotions. With gratitude, specifically, when we adopt a practice, when we're routine with this, consistent with this, we're actually shrinking back down that amygdala, and we're re-expanding these 2 other brain parts. And there's a lot of power there. And again, it really only takes a few minutes a day of practice to be consistent with it. I always like to talk about things that people may not be thinking of. And so when I say gratitude, you might automatically be thinking about other people in your life who you're grateful for. And if that's the case, amazing. I'm not do that because like that's powerful stuff. But other things that you might be grateful for that you might also be taking advantage of is the material things that you have in this life. If you get to wake up on a bed that's soft and warm and comfortable, pillows, running water, refrigerators that keep your food fresh, shelter. Not all of us have those things. And to be grateful for that, it is a big thing. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. I actually just experienced something on a recent trip where people didn't have those things. Thinking about yourself, the gifts, your strengths, your skills that you have and that you're bringing to this world, being grateful of that could be another way to incorporate into your gratitude practice. Yeah, there's so many different things that we could be grateful for. The air that we get to breathe. We talked about oxygen just a bit ago. The fact that we get to breathe this air, the fact that we get to eat the food that we get to eat, all of these things you could incorporate into that gratitude practice. And yeah, that's a really big one. It doesn't matter what time of day you do this, but I did do some work with a physician who recommended the morning time when we first wake up, just because you're getting yourself in that framework for the day. So if things happen during the course of the day that kind of knock you off your track, at least you have a foundation of this gratitude for the day. But again, from a science perspective, as long as you do it at some point in the day, for at least a few minutes, you will likely see some changes, some positive changes in your life. So that's all about the gratitude piece. And moving on, a few more categories here. We're getting to the end. And the next piece is all about emotional expression. It's a really big one for us. And this could be a really scary one for us because, again, we're not taught emotional management in schools. What we're taught is, or at least what I was taught in my culture and in my country, was to suck it up and move on.
Soldier on.
Exactly. And not to actually express what you're feeling. And folks, we are human. We are emotional beings. And those emotions are part of us, the human condition, all of them. I don't like to say positive or negative emotions because all of emotions are human. And some emotions are not as pleasant to experience for sure, but they're all human. And the idea is really, my goal is always talking about creating an emotional highway without traffic in our existence, because like there's always going to be a situation or an event that triggers something. We're always going to feel we're never not in the mood. We're always emoting about something. We may not always be like expressing it, but we're always feeling something. And so the idea is to acknowledge what you're feeling and then in as real time as possible, release it in a healthy way. And I say healthy way because so often we choose unhealthy ways, whether that's smoking cigarettes, whether that's drugs, whether that's drinking alcohol, whether that's eating the added sugars like constantly as a way to make us feel good and cope in the moment. Short term, it feels really good. Long term, not so great for us. So coping in those healthy ways, and there's so many ways in which we can do that. And I'll just list a few ideas here. Like journaling is a really popular way for folks to just like get it out on paper. Some people write a letter and then just burn it. Some people talk to people. Some people talk to people that they love and just getting it off their chest. Some people talk to therapists. Some people go out in nature and talk to nature, just to kind of get what it is that they're experiencing off of their chest. And that's so important, because if we're not doing that, if we're bottling it up, as I did for many, many years, if we're bottling all of this up, at some point our body is not going to be able to bottle up anymore. There's just no more real estate, and our neuropeptides will start to kind of like, there's nothing left, like nowhere else for these emotions to go, and so they will bubble up into those physical stresses. They will bubble up into those emotional stresses. There's a whole body of science called the mind-body syndrome connected to this topic. And I encourage folks, if this is an area that you want to explore more, Google it. It's some really powerful stuff here. If we are able to manage our emotions, we can avoid so many physical health issues, emotional health issues, and it can be very liberating for us to start doing this work. The next category, number 9, I believe, is all about connection. And yes, you might now be thinking relationships. That's exactly what this category is all about. We are born to connect. We're social creatures, and we want to connect with people who we love and trust.
Yeah.
So it's surrounding yourself with people who we love and trust. That community, that is so important for us as humans. And the things I like to highlight in this category, because I do think that these go overlooked often as well, is also how might you optimize the connection that you have with your environment. And that environment can be your home environment. That could be your work environment. That could be the town or the city that you live in, state or the country that you live in. Are you connected to it? Are there pieces of it that you don't like? How might you optimize all of these different environments so that they are fulfilling to you? And maybe there's some tough decisions there for sure. But the idea is that we want to feel that we could be as possible and love where we are as much as possible. And then that final prong I like to highlight here is that connection to yourself, and that's a biggie. That's a biggie. And this significantly connects to my story that I shared earlier today. And when I say connecting to yourself, what are your values? What's important to you? Are you a people pleaser? Are you living life for other people, or are you living life for yourself? Getting really, really clear on that as your true North Star, because when we are not ourselves, if we are making decisions, taking actions that are out of alignment with who we really are and what we really want, that can absolutely lead to chronic stress and burnout. And then the last category, I always like to leave this to last, because it's all about having fun.
Yay!
Laughter. It's all about like, that's triggering all of these like feel good hormones in our bodies that just, oh my God, laughter goes so far. Having fun goes so far. So in this part, I always invite you to think about, tune into your inner kid. What does your inner kid want to do right now? And just go and do it. Who cares about adulthood? Just do it. Like, obviously, if it's safe, and obviously if you're not hurting anyone, just get out there and do it. And have fun and laugh. And that's number 10. So that is the O'Brien 10 Nicolette.
It's simple yet so profound because we overlook these things. Like when you were saying it, I was like cross-referencing with myself whether I apply them or not. I'm like, some yes, some no. I need to double down on that. So, well, thank you for that, Andrew. Okay, so we are nearing the mark of 1 hour, so I have a few more questions for you, and then the listeners can let you go. So, what is next for you, Andrew?
What is next for me? What is next? Keep working on myself. That's never going to go away. It's I don't believe that you can ever get to a state of perfection. There is no perfection when it comes to managing your stress. And so it's just continuing to figure out how to optimize, because we're always evolving, we're always growing, we're in different life circumstances and situations. So it's really continually to keep that O'Brien 10 in check for myself personally, just so that I can always be ahead of that curve and never experience chronic stress and burnout again. That is one of my missions. The other mission that I have is to support other people in this way. if they are experiencing this chronic stress and burnout. My vision is to eradicate this from the planet because it's 100% possible. And I know when we are not living under the veil of chronic stress and burnout, so much more becomes possible, so much more becomes clear. That true North Star of yours becomes that much more clear. And if I can support people in that way, that is an absolute privilege. And so I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing in that regard. And that, I would say, is what's next for me.
I love that. So, if you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening and the world as your legacy, what would it be?
Love yourself, know yourself, have compassion for yourself as a biological being, and know that there is nothing that can stop you from being who you want to be, being who you are, and getting what you want out of this life.
Thank you. So, how can people reach out to you, Andrew?
How can people reach out to me?
Mhm.
Yeah, so if people go to my website, if like I do have like a downloadable flyer of the O'Brien 10, so if people are really into that, they can certainly download this flyer for themselves. They can go to my website. Do you want me to say the website now, or will it be like on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can say it. Say it right
Okay.
now.
So it's www.themindblowingcoach.com, and then if you go to the free resources, you'll see where you can download that flyer that I put together of that O'Brien 10. And if you want to schedule a free stress relief strategy call with me, you can do that too. There's another link on my site to take me to my booking portal to schedule that, and that's a 45-minute free session that we would have with each other.
Awesome. Awesome. And there you have it, guys. You heard it from the person, Andrew O'Brien. Before we close off, Andrew, I'd like to thank you personally for the work that you're doing for the world and for advancing every step of the way despite the challenges, creating trails for those that will come after you. And for our listeners, this has been that one podcast with that controversial name, You're Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, if you find yourself thinking that you are worthless, you are probably not alone, but more importantly, ask yourself a level deeper. If I'm worthless, then why the heck am I here? It is because your soul have chosen to be here energetically all the way from the ethers, and for that reason itself, you are worthy and you are enough. This has been Andrew O'Brien, your guest of the day, and Nick Nieras, your host, signing off. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a privilege getting to know you and be here.
Thank you.